Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Okay, alhamdulillah. We're on class number 2, dealing with the Seerah, or the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Alhamdulillah, I see that most of you guys have the books. If there's somewhere, does anyone not have this book? Okay, we'll get you guys a book. Let the students in here get theirs first, and then I'll make sure that you guys get one. Here you go. Okay, so this is the abridged version or biography of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Walaikum salam. Yes, middle schoolers, right?
What is high school?
Middle school or high school?
High school.
High school.
Where's middle school?
Middle schoolers.
It's over there.
Next door. Okay, so we'll be covering the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we talked in the introductory class, we talked a little bit about how many non-Muslims view Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can you just kind of give me a recap of what we discussed last week? First and foremost, do you guys have my homework? You guys were supposed to write an essay.
So it's written, but it's not printed.
It's written, but it's not printed.
I can show it.
No, I don't need you to show it. I need you to give it to me. That's what I need. You can email me. I'm going to leave you an email, and that way you can just email it to me directly. All right? That way I have it. What about you guys?
I forgot about it.
You forgot about it?
I forgot about it.
Okay.
I didn't type mine, but I wrote it.
You wrote it out.
Yeah.
Can you type it?
Yeah.
Because see, the thing about writing it by hand is I may not be able to read you. It may not be legible. And then I got to struggle to see. And plus, you guys are in high school, so you should be in the habit of typing essays out anyway. All right? That should be mandatory. You should know how to type up the essay. All right? So, they don't have my homework. 2 did it, but then there's some, some shady stuff going on. One wrote it, he typed it up. This one, he wrote it out. The rest, Matthew.
Wow. Guys, in school, do you guys do your homework? Yes? And then this time, in this school, you guys don't do your homework? Is that how the rule is?
He wasn't here.
No, you don't count, but everybody else. Guys,
So,
you know this
yeah.
class is, you're earned to be in this class. You can't just come here. We're not going to tolerate people not taking this class seriously. So you guys just remember this teacher, that's disrespectful to the teacher. Okay? Just remember that.
It should take you no longer than 10 minutes, 20 minutes to just type up your thoughts on why you think studying about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life is important. That's pretty much it. It doesn't require, there's no right or wrong. I'm not going to grade it. You understand? It's just for me to know a little bit about you and why you think that this is important to you. Okay? So there's, can anyone, who was here last week? Okay, pretty much all of you with the exception of 2. All right, tell me what we talked about last week. What did we talk about last week? Go ahead.
How even non-Muslims like Gandhi and other people, they know more about the Quran than we do, and that's unacceptable.
Okay. How many non-Muslims know more about the Quran than we do? Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Isn't it about Islam, not Quran, like Islam in general?
Islam in general? No, I'm asking you. Don't ask me. I'm asking you.
Yeah,
What did we talk about last week?
They know more about Islam in general than most Muslims.
Okay, he already said that. I mentioned some quotes. I put some quotes on the board. I mentioned some things. Did you take notes? Did you have a notebook or a piece of paper last week? You guys should be taking notes. That'll help you. Also, I upload the video to my Facebook page. So if you want to review the video, you can always go to my Facebook page and play the video over and listen to it again, especially the night before we have the class. So Tuesday or Wednesday morning when you get some time, or after school, to go through it and listen to it again. That's why that way you're familiar. Anyone else can tell me anything can you recall a quote or anything that we mentioned about what many non-Muslims, influential people had to say about Muhammad?
I remember Gandhi said that he was just kind of paraphrasing, but he said that he read the two autobiographies of Prophet Muhammad's life. That's how I said them, and he was kind of sad there wasn't a third one.
Why? Because it's
Such a great life.
such a great life. Gandhi said that he read 2 volumes of Muhammad's life, and he was sad when he closed the second volume because he wished that there was a third volume to read about that great life. Okay? Anyone else?
Another man, a Christian man, he ranked the top 100 most influential people of all time, and he, as a Christian man, ranked Muhammad as number 1.
Right. Michael H. Hart, he wrote a book called The 100 Most Influential Men in the World, and he as a Christian listed Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as number 1. Do you know who he put at number 51? Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He put Umar as number 51 of the top 100 influential men that has ever walked the earth. Interesting. Just an FYI. You had your hand up.
I said it was about Gandhi and his and how he read the 2 volumes.
Okay. Anything else? All right. So you guys can write what I have here. Just a small diagram of probably not the Prophet's entire family. Obviously, there's not enough room on the board to write out his entire family. But what you have here is probably the most important people in his life, right? From childhood all the way up until he received revelation. All right? These are probably the most influential people on his life, or had the most impact on his life leading up to him becoming a prophet. So we know that the Prophet ﷺ was born which year? There was Arabs, they had a very, they still do even today, they have a way of identifying events by way of naming that year by that event. All right, there was a special event that happened during the same year that the Prophet ﷺ was born. When was he born?
570.
570, okay. What happened? There was a special event. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually mentions the event in the Quran. There was a very special event that happened the same year he was born.
It was the War of the Elephants.
The War of the Elephants. He was born Am al-Fil, the year of the elephant. So the Arabs, they have a way of naming or identifying the year by way of a certain event that took place within that year, right? The year that the Prophet's wife died, his uncle died, and the same year that Revelation stopped for a little bit, that was called Am al-Huzn, the year of grief, because so many things happened to him in that one little span of a year that we know that year by Am al-Huzn, the year of grief. So if you were a historian or you were pretty much familiar with the biography of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if I said to you Am al-Huzn, you would already know exactly which year I'm talking about, without even me mentioning the number of the year, but because of the events that took place within that year. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ was born Am al-Fil, the year of the elephant. There's actually a chapter in the Quran named Surah al-Fil, right? أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. Did you not see how your Lord dealt with the companions of the elephant? All right, and this was a Christian by the name of Abraha, who was from the area of Yemen, and he felt jealous that people were migrating or people were making Hajj to the Kaaba in Mecca every year. And of course, Hajj then, just as it is now, was big business. It was big business. People would go not to just perform Hajj, but it was a lot of money involved, a lot of business, merchandising, and things like that. So Abraha decided that he would get an army of elephants and he would go and he would crush the Kaaba. And he had a makeshift Kaaba that he built himself, so that once he crushed the Kaaba, then people could actually come to Yemen to the Kaaba that he built. All right? And before going to Mecca to crush the Kaaba, he went there first to basically wreak havoc on the people of Mecca. And he robbed Abdul Muttalib, who was pretty much the chief of Mecca during that time. He was the chief of Bani Hashim, who was a sub-tribe under the mother tribe Quraysh. And Abdul Muttalib was known to be a very generous man, was known to be a well-respected man in the city of Mecca. And I just want to capture just a piece of the conversation between Abraha and Abdul Muttalib. All right, if you turn your books, you guys can share this book here. You guys can share this book here. You too. I want to share with you a portion of Abraha's conversation with Abdul Muttalib. Very, very powerful conversation. I am particularly a stickler for good conversation, dialogue, right? Very powerful conversation. I'm reading from the Arabic book. I don't know which page is on in English. If you go to the chapter of, it should say Nasab al-Nabi, the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ. Do you see that chapter? And underneath that, it should say Qissatul Fil, the story of the elephant. Do you guys see that? Do you have a book?
Yeah, it's on page 83.
Can you share with someone? It's on page what?
83.
Page 83. Turn to page 83. All right? And so it says وَكَانَ سَبَبْ قِصَّةَ أَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ, and the reason behind the story of the companions of the elephant. And then he mentions Ibn Ishaq's statement. And I think if you flip over, I want to go fast forward to the conversation between Abraha and Abdul Muttalib. فقال أبرهة لترجمانه قل له إنك كنت أعجبتني حين رأيتك ولقد زهدت فيك. قال لما؟ قال جئت إلى بيت وهو دينك ودين آبائك وشرفكم وعصمتكم لأهدمه فلم تكلمني فيه. That Abraha, he's told his, see if you can find this exact sentence. Abraha, he said to the interpreter, all right, obviously he was not Qurashi, so they spoke a different dialect of Arabic, and he had an interpreter. And he said to the interpreter, say to Abdul Muttalib that you amazed me. Do you guys see this conversation? You found it?
Yeah.
Okay. He said, you amazed me when I saw you. What does he say? Read. What he said. What does it say in English?
I was impressed by you when I saw you.
Right.
But now I would have nothing to do with you.
Right. And he asked them why. This is Abraha, the one who wants to crush the Kaaba, having a conversation with Abdul Muttalib. And all of this is taking place the same year that Muhammad ﷺ was born. So Abraha, he says, I was amazed by you. You impressed me. He said, but now I want nothing to do with you. So Abdul Muttalib asked him, why? He said, Jittu ila baytin. I came to the Kaaba, wa huwa dinuk, and this is your religion, wa dinu aba'ik, and the religion of your forefathers, wa sharafukum wa ismatukum, and this is where you get your honor and your nobility from, this Kaaba. Everybody around the world comes to visit this Kaaba, right? And this is where you guys, where Quraysh, this is where you get your nobility, your honor from. He said, and I came li'ahdimahu, to destroy it, to crush it to the ground. He said, فَلَمْ تُكَلِّمْنِ فِيهِ, but you never said anything to me about it. You never said anything to me about the Kaaba. He said, وَتُكَلِّمْنِي فِي مِئَتَيْ بَئِيرٍ. He said, and all you wanted was the 200 camels that I took. That when Abraha came the first time to Mecca, he stole 200 camels. And those 200 camels belonged to Abdul Muttalib. So Abdul Muttalib went to Yemen and he requested for Abraha to give him his 200 camels back. So Abraha said that, I used to have a lot of respect for you. You were this, main chief of Mecca, well respected. He said, but now after I saw what you did, I don't really have much respect for you. So Abdul Muttalib said, well, why? He said, because I came to crush the Kaaba, and the only thing you wanted to talk about was your 200 camels that I took. He said, you didn't say anything to me about crushing the Kaaba. So basically, and this is your religion, this is where you get your honor, your nobility from. And listen to what Abdul Muttalib said to him. قال أنا رب الإبل. He said what? Read in English. What did he say? What did Abdul Muttalib say? Huh? What does it say in your book?
I'm the owner of the camels.
Well, if you're translating it literally, if he said Rabb, it doesn't mean God. It is basically saying I'm the owner of the camels, right? He said, Ana Rabbul Ibil, I'm the owner of the camels. He said what? Wal Bayt lahu Rabb. He said, and the Kaaba, it has an owner as well. I am the owner of the camels. The Kaaba has an owner as well. يَمْنَعُهُ مِنْكَ. And he will prevent you from crushing the Kaaba. Basically saying, what is he saying? What is Abdul Muttalib saying to Abraha? What is he saying? He said, فَقَالَ مَا كَانَ لِيَمْنَعُهُ مِنِّي قَالَ فَأَنْتَ وَذَاكَ فَأَمْرَ بِإِبْلِهِ فَرُدَّتْ عَلَيْهِ. What is Abdul Muttalib saying to Abraha? What is he saying?
As Allah, the owner of the Kaaba, will protect it.
So basically saying, I didn't need to say anything to you about crushing the Kaaba, because the Kaaba has a Lord that will protect it. All I'm talking to you about is the 200 camels that you took from me. Those are my camels. And what does that tell you about the faith system of the people of Mecca? What does that tell you? Although they were idolaters, and just because a person worships idols doesn't necessarily mean that they don't believe in God. All right? When Allah addressed them as mushrikun, as idolaters, He didn't address them as people who were pretty much atheists, who didn't believe in God at all. As a matter of fact, the fact that they believed in idols or worshipped idols was an indication that they believed in God. Because did they worship the idols believing the idols were God?
Yeah.
No. Did they worship the idols believing the idols were God? No. They say in the Quran, مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى. That we only worship these idols so they bring us closer to God. So that is an indication that when they worship these idols, they were not worshiping these idols believing that these idols were God. They thought that these idols were replicas of religious people, righteous people who died or passed away, and that they could worship these statues, these idols, and they would take their prayers to God. That's what they believed. But they didn't believe that these idols were actually God, okay? So the fact that they do commit shirk is basically an indication that they do believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So just an FYI that we don't ever want to get twisted on that, and to think that because they worship idols, they don't necessarily believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is nothing further than the truth. All right? They do believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Abdul Muttalib told him that the reason why I didn't say anything to you about the Kaaba, because the Kaaba has a Lord. I don't need to speak to you about that. I just want the camels that you stole from me. All right? And Abraha, what did he do? He gave him his camels back. He had no other choice but to respect that, because he saw that they had a resolve. They had a belief. They believed that things that are in Allah's hands, Allah will handle it. You follow me? There are things in your life that you don't have any control over, and that sometimes you're going to have to just let whatever Allah decide to do with that situation, you're going to have to just leave it in His hands, because it's not in your control. You follow me? There's things that are going to happen in your life that you're not going to have any control over, and you're going to have to do, as one of the prophets said, "Ufawwidu amri ila Allah." I put my affairs in the hands of Allah, because there's nothing I can do about it. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ was actually born that year. His grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, he had a number of children, and we're just going to concentrate on some of the most important individuals from amongst his children. Number one, Abu Talib. Obviously, this was the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. All right, Abu Talib, who actually never became Muslim, but he protected the Prophet ﷺ for 43 years before he died. He took the Prophet ﷺ when he was 8 years old, and he raised him from 8 all the way up until he became a prophet at 40. And then after he became a prophet, 10 years after that, that was a total of 43 years. He aided the Prophet ﷺ, took care of him, raised him as his own, and even supported him even after he became a prophet. So his uncle, Abu Talib, his uncle's brother, who was actually his father, Abdullah. Abdullah and Abu Talib were brothers. That was his uncle, that was his father's brother. All right, and then his other uncle, Hamza. So all of these were brothers. Abu Talib, Abdullah, Hamza, Abbas. There was another uncle, Harith. All right, there were many, many uncles, but these are some of the most important. All right. So Abdullah was actually his father, Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Then he had an uncle, Hamza, who eventually became Muslim, and we know him as what? What's his nickname? What was his nickname?
Isn't it like something lion?
Lion? Asadullah, the lion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right? And then his uncle Abbas. His uncle Abbas, who later became a Muslim as well. All right, so he had two of his uncles that became Muslim. Yes?
Abu Talib was not Muslim.
Abu Talib was not Muslim. No, I never said he was Muslim. Hamza and Abbas. I mentioned Abu Talib because, not because he was Muslim, but because he had a hand in raising the Prophet ﷺ. The man that we know today as Muhammad ibn Abdullah was not raised by his father, as we'll see. His father died actually before he was born. You know. Alright? So, and the Prophet ﷺ's mother, Amina. So Abdullah and Amina got married, they had a child, and that child's name was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is how he came into being. Alright? Alright? So fast forward a little bit. Amina is pregnant with Muhammad, and Abdullah goes on a journey to Medina for something. And he's on his way back to Mecca, and he dies. And the Prophet ﷺ is only 3 months old in the womb of Amina. So Abdullah died 6 months before the Prophet ﷺ was born. Alright, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confirms that he was actually born what is called a yatim. Alright, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alam yajidika yatiman fa'awa. Didn't we find you an orphan and we gave you shelter? Alright, fa'awa. Al-ma'wa is a place of shelter, of refuge. And what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referring to? Who became the Prophet ﷺ's refuge? His shelter. Who took him in and raised him? Abdul Muttalib first. And then after Abdul Muttalib died, he asked his son Abu Talib to look after his grandson Muhammad. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alam yajidika yatiman fa'awa. Al-yatim, I'm going to erase the top since we're pretty much done with that. Alright, the word in Arabic is yatim, which is an orphan. An orphan in Islam is any child whose father dies before he becomes the age of puberty. Okay, I'll write that here. Any child whose father dies before he or she reaches the age of puberty. Okay, so I have a question. Please write the definition down. You guys will be given a midterm test after the 5th week, after the 6th week, because this is a 12-week course, and this actually makes week number 2. So 4 weeks from now, which will be going into November, you will be given a midterm test that will be from the 1st class all the way up to the 6th class. All right, so please make sure you take notes. None of you guys are writing. You don't have anything to write with? No pen, paper, no nothing?
There's crayons in here.
No crayons. Ask him, step out and ask him if he has notebook or something to write
I
with.
got paper.
Loose leaf paper?
I do.
Okay, give sadaqah.
Thank you.
Give some sadaqah, inshallah. You got something to write with? Okay, so a yatim or orphan in Arabic, as the scholars of fiqh describe, this is any child whose father, look at the definition, pay attention to the definition. Yes?
I'm gonna go ask for 3 pence.
Okay, cool.
Can you ask for 4?
4.
Okay, so any child whose father, operative term, any child whose father dies before he or she reaches the age of puberty. Okay. If you look at the definition of an orphan in Islam, it says any child whose father dies before he or she reaches the age of puberty. Why the father and not the mother?
I have a question for something else. It says, okay, what does it say after Ruqayya? Is it
Where?
after Ruqayya?
Ruqayya, Kulthum,
No, that's
Fatima.
I don't know how to spell it.
Where? This one?
No, before.
This one.
Yeah, that one.
Kulthum, Kulthum, Ummkulthum.
Alright, thank you.
Uh-huh. That was one of his daughter's names. Okay, it says any child whose father dies before he or she reaches the age of puberty. Why the father? Why not the mother? Why does the Islamic legislation or Islamic law define an orphan as any child whose father dies before he or she reaches the age of puberty? Why the father and not the mother?
The father earns the food, the money for the food, and then all.
Because in Islam, in a husband-wife relationship, right, the marriages in Islam are usually patriarchal. Patriarchal means that the vast majority of the authority of the marriage falls in the lap of the husband, or it is the authority of the husband, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed the husband not as a dictator over his wife or over his family, but he is largely responsible, right? Allah says in the Quran, "Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa bima faddala Allahu bihi ba'dahum 'ala ba'd wa bima anfaqu min amwalihim." He said that the men are the protectors and maintainers of their women because of the strength that Allah has given one of them more than the other, and because the men spend from their money. So the finances and the financial responsibility of the family, of the home, largely falls on the shoulders of the husband, not the wife. So if the husband dies, the father dies before the child reaches the age of puberty, then the child is basically an orphan without guardian. That doesn't mean that the mother cannot assume the position of a guardian, but that is not her initial role, to go out, provide, take care. Although we live in a society where many women, either due to divorce or due to being a widow or whatever the case may be, they have to sometimes be the mother and the father. But that's not her initial role, because if there was a father available, then she could just be the mother and do what her role necessitates. You follow me? All right, so any child whose father dies before he or she reaches the age of puberty, how and when is puberty determined in Islam? 13? No.
14.
No, it's not about numbers. Numbers are actually the last thing that they use to determine puberty.
When a child reaches a certain maturity, I guess.
Okay, when he reaches a maturity, how do we know? How do you know that you have reached the age of puberty? Because when you reach the age of puberty, you are actually Islamically considered an adult, responsible for your own self. All right? That does not mean now you can go home to your parents and say, I'm an adult, right? That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that once you reach the age of puberty, Islamically, you now become autonomous. You now become responsible for yourself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your parents should not have to wake you up for prayer. All right? And if you miss prayers or if you miss fasting or whatever, that now is your sin. Before you reach the age of puberty, the pin of accountability is lifted from you. You are not accountable. Once you reach the age of puberty, that's it. You are responsible for yourselves. How do we determine whether or not a child has reached the age of puberty?
By the time they're able to reproduce.
By the time I like that. By the time they're actually able to reproduce. Okay? Very good. I like that wording. All right? By the time they have reached the age of being able to reproduce, and you can tell that you are able to reproduce, and alhamdulillah, there's only men in the class today. You can tell through what is called nocturnal emission. And some of you might know it as a wet dream. You go to sleep, you wake up, there's a wet spot on your sheets, on your clothing, and you realize that some things happen in your dream, and you have to get up and you have to make a ghusl. That is called nocturnal emission. And that is how, when that happens, then you know at that point for certainty that you have now reached the age of puberty. Another way that we determine that the child has reached the age of puberty is what? Through pubic hair. If you begin to grow hair in certain parts of your body, then that is an indication that you have now reached the age of puberty. Underneath your arms, down in your private area, in your growing area, if you begin to grow hair in those areas, then that is an indication that you have reached the age of puberty. And for girls, right, they have what's called a menstrual cycle, where some days during the month, they don't pray and they don't fast, right? And it's because of those days, they don't pray and they don't fast, that they are experiencing what is called a menstrual cycle. And once a girl begins to experience her menstrual cycle, she has now reached the age of puberty. She is an adult. And salah is an obligation on her, fasting is an obligation on her, and all of the sins that she commits from that point forward are written against her. You follow me? And what if none of those signs are present? Then the scholars say when he reaches the age of 15. So if you don't have any, you're not able to reproduce, or you don't have any pubic hair, or the woman is not experiencing her menstrual cycle, once they reach the age of 15, that's it. They have reached the age of puberty. All right? So if any of those signs are present before 15, then they have actually reached the age of puberty. All right? So any child whose father dies before he or she reaches the age of puberty, they are considered an orphan, a yatim. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Alam yajidika yatiman fa'awa." Did we not find you as an orphan and we gave you refuge, we gave you shelter? Right? We gave someone to take care of you, and that was his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, and then his uncle Abu Talib, who raised him like he was one of his own. Okay? So the Prophet ﷺ's father Abdullah, based upon a verse from the Quran and based upon the consensus of many of the scholars, that Abdullah died before the Prophet ﷺ was actually born. So let me ask you, growing up, how did that help him or hurt him growing up later on? Did that help him or hurt him growing up as a man?
It helped him.
It helped him. How?
It helped him because it was showing us that how responsible we could be at a young age.
Very good. Possibly the Prophet ﷺ, obviously we're speculating here. I'm just trying to create a picture of the Prophet ﷺ as a man, as a boy growing up, so that you can have a more human connection to him. A lot of times when we talk about the Prophet ﷺ, we talk about him as this great messenger of Allah. And how many people can actually relate to him as the messenger of Allah? Nobody. Because he's on a different level. He's the messenger of Allah. He's a prophet. So it's really hard for you to connect with him as a prophet because you will never be a prophet. You don't know what it's like to be a prophet. And what we read about prophets, these great men, they had all these miracles and things like that. Can you as a human being actually relate to a prophet? No, not at all. You can see their struggles and you can probably relate to some of the hardships and the difficulties that they went through. But as far as them as a human being, sometimes we don't even see them as a human being. They're almost like a different type of species or a different type of race of human, when in fact they are human beings just like us. But we never get a chance to see that human side of them. But the beauty of the Prophet ﷺ's life is that his entire life was preserved, so that we can actually take a look into his personal life and see him as a human being and begin relating to him as a human being. So, what's your name? Yeah. Umar. Umar said that the Prophet ﷺ losing his father even before he was born actually helped him, all right, because it made him more responsible, even at a young age, to show him that although your father is not here, that you can still be a strong individual. You can still be a strong man and grow up to be a strong man and be responsible, because now you no longer have a father there to cater to you and wipe your nose and do everything for you. Now you basically have to do that for yourself. You follow me? So it actually helped him. Anything else you can think of that would help the Prophet? How did this situation help him?
So it kind of set him on his path for the future, and it kind of gave him extra strength, which he would end up needing. And,
How?
Well, I mean, like when he loses Khadija or his uncle when he gets older. I mean, I'm sure having already lost somebody kind of gives him experience in grief that kind of helps him deal with it.
Wow. Okay. Good. He said by losing his father at such a young age, or even he never actually even met his father, right? It gives him experience in dealing with grief, because from a very young age, he never even knew his father, right? And I'm sure probably most of you could probably never relate to that, right? I can relate to that because I didn't know my father growing up. So I know exactly what that feels like. Growing up, not seeing your father, you understand what I'm saying? And then wondering where he is, why isn't he coming to get me? Why doesn't he spend more time with me? And all of these questions are going on in your mind. And sometimes that can actually make you weaker. It makes you weaker because it's a side of you that is yearning for this fatherly attention. And then when you feel like you never get it, then it shatters you. It shatters you internally, and it makes you feel like you're less than, normal, because you're looking around, you're seeing other people with their fathers, and then you're like, well, Dad, where's my father? You understand what I'm saying? You can see how that can have an impact on you. Or even if your father is here, but maybe your father works a lot and you don't really see him a lot. All right, and you're wondering well, Dad, when is he ever going to take some time off? When is he ever going to take me somewhere? When is he ever going to spend time with me? You understand what I'm saying? That can actually make you weaker. All right, so pay attention to the fact that he didn't have his father, and as he mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, that could actually help him deal with grief better, because he lost a lot of people in his life. All of his daughters, all of them died. His sons, all of his daughters died in his lifetime, with the exception of Fatima. She was the only one that outlived him. But everyone else in his life, Ibrahim, who died when he was 18 months old, he died in the Prophet's arms. He was holding his son as he was taking his last breaths right there in his arms. His son died in his arms. He lost his daughter, Kulthum. He lost Ruqayya. He lost Zainab. He lost his son, Abdullah and Al-Qasim. He lost all of his children in his lifetime, with the exception of Fatima. She was the only one that outlived him. So, to your point, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ didn't grow up with his father, right? Perhaps that helped him deal with grief a lot better or a lot easier, because he's already, even from the beginning of his life, he's already had to deal with death from the very beginning, never even meeting his father. Can you imagine what that would feel like as a young boy and you never got a chance to meet your father? Can you imagine what that feels like? Sometimes, how many of you, your father has gone on a trip, has been gone for maybe a week or so, and you missed him, and you're wondering where is he at, and and that's only a week he's been gone. How much more would it be if he never came back? You understand what I'm saying? How much more would that grief feel if this father never came back? You never saw him again. So pay attention to his whole life and how all of these events in his life led up to him being this Muhammad Rasulullah that we all fell in love with. So it's important for us to go back and get the backstory to find out how did he become this, what are some of the events that led up to him being this great man that we see him to be now. All right? Is covering any of this, does this help you connect the dots? Is this helping? Huh? Somewhat? Because what we saw or what we know of the Prophet ﷺ is just that he's the messenger of Allah. We read this hadith, he did this with Umar, he did that with Abu Bakr, he did this with this one, and that's all we know about him. But then when we go back to the beginning and we begin building, we begin build the scaffolding, right, to understanding who he is in our current lives. All right? So that was his relationship with his father. His father died. Never had a chance to even meet his father. All right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him a replacement. Other men in his life that he needed, because a young boy, a woman cannot raise a young boy to be a man. You guys agree with that? A young boy, a mother cannot raise a young boy to be a man. Because learning how to be a man is not something that you're going to open a book and learn how to do. How do you learn how to become a man? How do you learn how to become a man?
By being raised by your father, he would teach you what it is to be a man.
Okay. By being around other men. Okay.
Support.
Support by who?
By your parents. By your father.
By other men. That's the key point. A woman cannot do that. A woman cannot teach a boy how to be a man. She can't, because she's not a man. There's certain things that we are going to go through as men that only other men can relate to. Only other men would be able to explain. You understand? So a woman was not designed to teach a man how to be a man. That's not her job. A woman is very nurturing and compassionate and merciful. Right? Whereas men, on the other hand, we teach you how to be, man up. You fall, your dad says, shake it off. It's good. You're all right. A woman's going to say, let me go get you a Band-Aid. Let me pour some peroxide on it. No, stop. It's a boo-boo. Blah, blah, blah. And, some boys, they love that. They love that type of baby attention. All right? And this is why when they grow up to be men, they act like the same way they used to act with their mothers, like this little baby, the little baby boy. That's the same way that they act with their wives. Your wife ends up treating you just like your mother used to treat you. Because when you get around women, you automatically go back to that time when you were a boy around your mom. And let me ask you a question. If you get married to a woman and you start to act like the little boy you were when you were around your mother, do you think your wife is going to like that or respect that? Probably? Probably not. Absolutely. Because women, when they marry a man, they want you to be a man. They don't want you to be a boy. Right? Because if they knew that you were going to come into their relationship and act like a little boy, they wouldn't have married you. They married you because they want someone to come in and be responsible and act like a man. Right? So, very important to understand that. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alam yajidika yatiman fa'awa, didn't we find you as an orphan and we gave you shelter? Meaning, didn't we place other men in your life? So although Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took his father, there were other men in his life to help him develop into the man that he became. Like Abu Talib, like his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, like his uncle Abu Talib, all right, and all of his other uncles, all right. So there's also other men in the family that would be able to help out. All right, so now let's talk about his mother, Amina. All right, Amina had Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then she died when?
Maybe when he was 6 years old.
When he was 6 years old. When the Prophet ﷺ was 6 years old, his mother died. I mean, can it get even more sad than that? I mean, he never even met his father. And then his mother dies when he's 6 years old. I mean, when you think about that. When you think about that for a moment, that he's born to a father that he never met. And then 6 years, when you're 6 years old, you're just getting comfortable with your parents. You're getting comfortable with the fact that, you know, your father's no longer there. So then you start to put all of your hope into your mom, and only to lose her at 6 years old. His mom dies at 6. Think about that. He has no mother, no father. At 6 years old, he has no mother, no father. I mean, when you think about that, that could have a serious impact on a child to lose both of his parents by 6 years old.
Did he have his grandpa before his mom died?
What do you mean?
Like, did his grandpa give him support before his mom died?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Did his grandfather give him support before his mother died? Yes, of course. He was the chief of the tribe, so yeah, they took pride in that. Of course, Abdul Muttalib, his son died. Abdullah, his son died, and his son had one child. Muhammad he's the only child from his mother and his father. He's the only child. He didn't have any brothers. All right, so quite naturally, the grandfather is going to take responsibility. That's my grandson. Yeah, he was involved. He was involved in his life, absolutely. So he loses his mother at 6 years old. SubhanAllah. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him other women, puts other women in his life, right? Like the wife of Abu Talib, who was the mother of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was Fatima. Fatima bintu Asad. Fatima bintu Asad was the wife of Abu Talib. Okay? This was Abu Talib's wife. This was Ali ibn Abi Talib. That was his mother. Alright? So I'm going to erase this so we can start talking about the women that was in his life. Because you need both. You need the mother and the father to have a complete child. Mother and a father. So Abu Talib and Fatima bintu Asad now become his primary caretakers. Abdul Muttalib raised him, and then when Abdul Muttalib was on his deathbed, he reached out to his son Abu Talib and said, take care of Muhammad. So Abu Talib, he took Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in to come live with him. So now the Prophet ﷺ goes from living with Abdul Muttalib to now living with Abu Talib. He lost his father before he was born. He lost his mother when he was 6. And he lost his grandfather when he was 8. So by 8 years old, he has lost 3 of the most important people in his life. SubhanAllah. By 8 years old, he has experienced so much death in his life. He lost his father before he was born. He lost his mother when he was 6. And he lost his grandfather when he was 8. You follow me? He's experienced so much death in his life as a young boy. All right? So Abu Talib and Fatima bintu Asad And these were the parents of Ali, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Ali ibn Abi Talib. So Ali was basically the Prophet ﷺ's uncle, was the Prophet ﷺ's cousin. That was his first cousin. All right, Abu Talib and the Prophet's father, Abdullah, were brothers. So that makes Ali and the Prophet ﷺ first cousins. And the Prophet ﷺ eventually married his daughter to Ali, Fatima. So let's talk about Fatima bint Asad. The Prophet ﷺ used to refer to her as his mother. He used to call her Ummi, Ummah, my mother. He used to refer to her as his mother. And some of the scholars say that this shows the permissibility if you are being raised in a step-parent home. All right, maybe your dad remarries and he has a new wife, and although she's not your mother, is it permissible for you to refer to her as your mother? And some of the scholars say yes, so as long as you know that she's not your biological mother. But out of respect, out of compassion, to refer to her as your mother, or maybe your mom passes, Allah forbid, and your father remarries, all right, and now you have a stepmom, is it permissible for you to refer to your stepmom as mommy or mother? Yes, provided you know that that is not your biological mother. And the proof of that is the Prophet ﷺ used to refer to Fatima bint Asad as his mother, even though that wasn't his mother. That was his aunt, right?
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead. That was his aunt.
Because at first I wanted to tell you that was his aunt, because his uncle got his aunt.
Right. So his uncle was married to her, so that made her his aunt, right? So he used to refer to her as his mother. So let's identify some of the women that was in his life. You had Fatima bint Asad. All right, and then you had Thuwayba, who used to breastfeed him. All right, and then you had Halima as-Sa'diyah. You had Halima as-Sa'diyah, who also used to breastfeed him. And then you had Ayman, who he also used to refer to as his mother. So you had all of these women in his life. So he had Fatima bint Asad, he had Thuwayba, he had Halima, and then he had Ayman. All of these women and many other women in his life that also helped to shape his life. All right, from a maternal perspective. Maternal meaning from a motherly perspective. Yes.
When he was little, didn't he go live with Halima, like in the desert, like as a living nanny, I guess?
Yes, he did. He went to go live with Halima Sa'diyah. Yes, absolutely, in the desert. And usually these women would be, Bedouins, and they would take them out to the desert. They would teach them pure Fusha Arabic. All right, and then teach them, how to navigate their way through the desert. All right, teaching them manly things, teaching them how to navigate the desert, teaching them how to be sheep herders and things like that, how to, milk, the goats, milk the cows, things like that. So they would teach them certain things, right? Maternal things that only a woman could probably show you how. So it shows you the need for both mother and father, male and female, because that is what gives you as a human being that balance, right? How would you as a young boy know how to have a healthy interaction with your wife if you never had interaction with your mother? Right? And let's just say you never met your mother before. There was no woman in your life. All you knew was your father. And then later on in life, 25, 26, 27, time for you to get married. You never had any interaction with a woman. How do you know how to deal with your wife? How do you know how to talk to her? How do you know how to be, a gentleman? How do you know how to be, catering to her emotional needs? How? When you've never interacted with a woman.
I have one already.
Uh-huh. Okay, you can be respectful to her, but women need more than just respect in a relationship. They need you to be aware of their emotional needs, right? They need you to be emotionally available. And when you're with your mother growing up, she is the one that teaches you. A man is not going to teach you how to be emotional. Men are going to tell you, get over it, shake it off, get up, stop crying, stop acting like a girl, right? These are the things that men are going to teach you. Women, on the other hand, are going to teach you how to be in touch with your other side, that soft side. That's their nature. All right? And so by you interacting with your mother as you grow up, she is basically teaching you, preparing you to be a good husband to your wife later on. And if any woman ever wants to know how good of a husband her husband is going to be, all she needs to do is to look at his relationship with his mother. Because how you interact with your mother is exactly how you are going to interact with your wife. You understand? What do I mean by that? How you interact with your mother is probably the exact same way that you are going to interact with your wife. What do I mean by that? Yes.
So like, if your mother tells you to clean the dishes, when you have your own wife and you're finished like eating dinner or any type of breakfast or lunch, you clean the dishes?
Okay, that might be true. Some men might get lazy once they get married, but when you're at home and your mom tells you to clean the dishes, clean up after yourself, right? She's conditioning you to be domestic. She's conditioning you, right? You should be able to at least pick your plate up from the table and put it in the sink. At very least, you should be able to do that, right? You're looking at me like, what? Put what in the sink? No, your mother, by asking you to clean up your room, asking you to clean up behind yourself, she's teaching you how to be domestic. So when you marry a woman, you can never say, oh, I never had to clean up after myself. You're a liar. Your mother made you clean up. All right? Okay, so he had all of these women in his life. He actually named his daughter Fatima after Fatima bint Asad because he loved her so much. He named his youngest daughter. Fatima was his baby girl. This was his youngest daughter. And he named Fatima after his aunt Fatima bint Asad. All right, so you can see he had Abdul Muttalib, he had Abu Talib, he had all of his uncles. So he had men, and then he also had the female component, the maternal component, which was his aunt and other women in his life that helped him nurture that other side. All right, and then later on, as he got older, when he was about 25, he began to work for this rich, wealthy woman from Mecca. And this woman, was an older woman. This woman was an older woman, lived in Mecca. She was very wealthy. She was one of the richest people in Mecca. All right, businesswoman. And the Prophet ﷺ used to do business for her, used to work for her. And he would take, her merchandise and go to the area of Damascus, Sham, and do business. And then come back with her money.
She's 15 years older than me.
She was 40 at the time, and he was 25. So as you can see, this was not necessarily a normal situation because a woman at 40 would not be looking for a 25-year-old man. Do you think? What woman at 40 is looking for a man that's 25? He's a baby in her eyes. She wouldn't even consider marrying a man, especially someone of her stature. She was rich. She was wealthy. You understand what I'm saying? She wants somebody more experienced. But there was something about Muhammad at 25 years old that she saw in him that made her attracted to him. What was it? What did she see? What would a woman at 40 years old see in a 25-year-old man?
His honesty.
His honesty. You was gonna say the same thing? His loyalty. Interesting.
Respect.
Respect for her? The respect he had for her? Or the respect he had for himself? Or both?
Or both.
Okay. So you know that a woman at 40 years old would probably never consider a young boy at 25. Women actually mature quicker than men do, which is why in your age bracket, 15, 16, 17 years old, the girls that are 15, 16, 17 years old are probably not even looking in your direction. It's not because you're not handsome. It's not because you're not cute. Sometimes as men, you look at yourself in the mirror, you're like, well, why are they not looking at me? Why are they not trying to kick it with me? I don't understand. I'm handsome, I'm cute, but they're not. Nobody's saying anything to me, right? She's not saying anything to you because a girl at your age actually sees you as immature. She's looking for someone a little bit older. You understand? It's nothing wrong with you. Don't let that shoot your self-esteem, right? That's nothing wrong with you. It's just that a girl at your age is usually maybe 2 or 3 years advanced than you are. They mature quicker than we do. So when a girl is about 16, she's actually about 18, 19. And when a boy is 16, he's actually about 13. I'm telling you how it is.
Let's be real, we can't deny.
I would definitely be 5 years old.
5 years old? Yeah, we mature slower, at a slower process. All right? We mature at a slower process. Women are more creative. They use the right side of the brain, which is the creative, the ingenuous, that type of the brain that makes them, more outgoing, more willing to take risks. Whereas men, we use the left side of the brain, which makes us we're very strategic, we're very cautious, we're very organized, right? That's that side of the brain, all right? And women can usually use both sides of the brain simultaneously. Whereas men, we only focus on one side of the brain instead of the other. So you can see that women are designed, they move quicker than we do. They mature quicker than we do. So at 40 years old, she's really about 50. And at 25 years old, right, she's not really looking for it. So it was something that she saw in him where she is. I mean, she's wealthy, she's rich, she can have any man she wants. But she chooses somebody who's 25 years old.
Isn't it kind of strange that by 40 she still wasn't married? She still wasn't married?
I believe she was married before. She was married before, briefly. But at the same token, it wouldn't be strange that at 40 years old she's still unmarried, because that society was a little different than the society that we live in today. All right, women didn't actually go out into the world, and they weren't actually a part of the world like that. Women were more domestic. They stayed at home. They had children, and just kind of stayed to themselves. They didn't mingle with the world like that. I mean, even here in America, up to about maybe 50, 60 years ago, women weren't out in the workplace here either. Right here in America. Women didn't work. Women stayed at home while the men went out and worked. Okay? It was only up until recent that women are out in the workplace, and you see women intermingling with men out in the workplace. All right? So he goes to Sham, he goes to the area of Damascus to go do some business for Khadija. And he comes back with all of her money. And Khadija's impressed. She's impressed. And she tells her maidservant, who actually accompanied the Prophet ﷺ on that journey, she tells him that she has an interest in Muhammad. She wants to marry him. And notice that even though Khadija was 40, even though she was wealthy, she was rich, she still never approached Muhammad by herself. She never said anything to him, right? Because women should keep some level of mystery with themselves and not go after men. In today's time, it's a little different. When a woman sees a man that she wants, she goes after him. And sometimes when a woman does that, she does it to her own detriment, because when a woman goes after a man, then the man doesn't have to really do much work, because it's like, well, you chased me. I didn't ask to be with you. You asked to be with me. So that means that as a man, we don't necessarily have to work hard for the relationship, because she was the one that pursued you. But when you pursue a woman, you're going to work hard to make that relationship work. Why? Why?
Because you initiated.
You were the one who initiated. So it now becomes in your interest to keep the relationship because you were the one who pursued it. You see how that works? So when a woman actually goes after a man and pursues a man, it now becomes in her best interest to keep the relationship because she was the one that pursued it. All right, so we'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala. You guys can go pray. We already prayed, but you go ahead and make salat, inshallah ta'ala. Please, my email, I'm going to write it on here. You can email me your essay once you're done, inshallah ta'ala. I would like to have it before next class. Okay? All right. Shukran. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Do you keep the books?
I believe so. Talk to the brother, inshallah, before you take it with you.